The church was too quiet after the last hymn. The air still smelled faintly of lilies and candle wax, heavy with grief. My Eleanor's casket had already been lowered into the ground. The mourners had gone home, and I was left standing in the empty hall, staring at the pew where she used to sit every Sunday. Before we continue, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the bell icon so you never miss a story like this one. I lowered myself onto that pew, my hands trembling against the worn wood. For 45 years, Eleanor and I had built a life here. The house by the lake, the gardens she tended, the laughter of our son echoing through the halls. And now, in one breath of time, all of that had collapsed into silence. I thought the silence would last longer than it did, because before the candles were even cold, Daniel, my only son, sat down beside me with Chloe at his side. She had that polished smile she wore like armor, her arm looped through his as if she owned him. "Dad," Daniel said softly, almost rehearsed, "we've been thinking. The house. Maybe it's too much for you now." I blinked at him, not sure I'd heard right. "Too much?" Chloe leaned in, her perfume sharp in my nose. "What Daniel means is you shouldn't have to struggle maintaining that old place. It would be better for you in a retirement community. Safe, easier, modern, easier." The word felt like a slap. The house wasn't a burden. It was Eleanor's heart made brick and wood. She had painted those walls, planted those roses, raised Daniel under that roof. And now, hours after we put her in the ground, her memory was being framed as a problem to solve. "I'm not moving," I said quietly, steadying my voice. Daniel shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting to Chloe. She squeezed his hand before answering for him. "We've already spoken to a realtor. He says the market's strong right now. You'd get a good price, enough to make sure you never have to worry about anything again." I looked at my son, really looked at him, and realized the words weren't his. His lips moved, but Chloe's grip held the leash. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Grief turned heavy in my chest, but anger burned alongside it. Eleanor's grave was still fresh, and already my home was being carved into dollars and cents. I left the pew without another word and walked outside, the evening air cool against my face. Maggie Hayes, my neighbor, caught my arm as I stepped onto the sidewalk. She'd known Eleanor since high school, had brought casseroles for weeks when Eleanor's illness worsened. "You all right, Sam?" she asked gently. I shook my head. "They're already circling." She didn't need me to explain. Her eyes hardened. "Then you hold your ground. Eleanor wouldn't want you rushed into anything." I nodded, grateful for her steel, because in that moment I felt weak, hollowed out by loss, and blindsided by betrayal. That night, I walked through the house alone. Every room carried Eleanor's touch, the Afghan folded over the couch, the framed photographs, the scent of lavender still lingering in the sheets. My grief was raw, but beneath it was something colder, sharper, suspicion. Eleanor had been meticulous about everything. Her recipes, her garden, her finances. She had left me instructions for her funeral, down to the last hymn. And yet something told me she'd left more behind than what I'd seen. For now, though, I only knew one thing. The silence after the funeral wasn't silence at all. It was the sound of greed sharpening its knives. Grief is supposed to give you space. That's what I thought, at least. After Eleanor's passing, I believed the world would step back and let me sit with my sorrow for a while. Let me breathe in the silence of a house that had suddenly become too big. But grief didn't give me that space. Instead, it came knocking on my front door with glossy brochures and empty smiles. 3 days after the funeral, Daniel and Chloe arrived unannounced. I was sitting in Eleanor's armchair with her Afghan folded over my lap, trying to read one of the mystery novels she had loved. The words blurred on the page. My mind wandered to her laugh, to the way she used to nudge me when I fell asleep during Sunday television. The doorbell rang, breaking the fragile thread of memory. When I opened the door, Chloe stepped in first, her heels clicking on the hardwood. Daniel followed, a briefcase tucked under his arm. "Dad," he said, too cheerful for a man who had just buried his mother, "we brought some things for you." Chloe spread the brochures across the coffee table, like she was setting up a sales pitch. "Look, Mr. Turner, these are some of the best retirement communities in the state. Safe, clean, excellent health care, social activities. You wouldn't be alone." I stared at the pictures. Smiling seniors playing cards, swimming in pools, painting landscapes in bright studios, all carefully staged. Not one photo showed grief, not one hinted at loneliness. Just stock images of a life that wasn't mine. "I'm not interested," I said flatly. Daniel sat down, flipping open his briefcase. "Dad, just listen. These are floor plans. Smaller spaces, easier to maintain, and you wouldn't have to worry about mowing the lawn or fixing the roof." "Chloe and I think it's the best option." Chloe leaned forward, her voice honeyed. "We just want what's best for you." "That house is too big. It's not safe for someone your age to be living there alone." The words stung. I had spent my life keeping order, raising Daniel with Eleanor, working long days as a principal, and now I was being spoken to as though I were a child myself. "Your mother and I built that house together," I said slowly. "It's not just wood and nails. It's our life. Her roses are still blooming in the garden?" Chloe smiled tightly. "Roses don't pay bills, Mr. Turner, and neither do memories. Selling now would give you comfort and give Daniel security for the future." There it was, the slip, not just about me, about Daniel, about them. I turned to my son. "Is this what you want, or what she wants?" Daniel hesitated, his eyes flicking toward Chloe before returning to me. "Dad, it makes sense. You don't need all that space. And selling would help." "Help who?" The question burned on my tongue, but I swallowed it. Instead, I said, "I'm not signing anything. Not now. Not ever." The conversation soured quickly after that. Chloe gathered the brochures, her smile brittle, her voice clipped. "Well, think about it. The market won't stay strong forever." When they left, the house seemed colder than before. I sat at the table, staring at the brochures they'd left behind. Each one felt like an insult to Eleanor's memory. Later that evening, Maggie Hayes knocked on the back door with a pot of stew. She took one look at me, saw the brochures, and shook her head. "They're pushing you already, aren't they?" "Yes," I admitted. "Barely 3 days gone, and they're talking about selling." Maggie's eyes softened. "Sam, grief shows you who people really are." Daniel's lost, and she gestured toward the stack of papers. "She smells opportunity. Don't let them rush you. Don't let them rewrite Eleanor's story." I nodded, though my chest ached, because deep down I feared Maggie was right. Chloe's hand was on the wheel, and Daniel was just a passenger. That night, I opened my notebook, the one Eleanor had given me years ago when I retired. She told me to keep it for reflections, for writing down things that mattered. I hadn't used it much, but now I needed it. March 12th, 2025. Daniel and Chloe came with brochures for retirement homes, pressure to sell the house, spoke of security for the future. Eleanor's memory dismissed, refused. Writing it down gave me clarity. If they thought grief made me weak, they were wrong. Grief was sharpening me. Eleanor had always said, "Sam, you were born steady. Don't let anyone shake you." I could almost hear her voice as I closed the notebook and pushed the brochures into the trash. Grief has a way of making you see people clearly. The first week after Eleanor's funeral, I saw Chloe's ambition gleaming behind her polished smile. I saw Daniel's unease, the way his eyes flickered to her before he spoke, like he was waiting for permission. It left me with a knot in my chest. Not just sorrow, but doubt. Had we raised our son to value family? Or had I been blind to how easily someone else could bend him? I couldn't answer that in words. I needed proof. And to get proof, I had to test them. Eleanor and I had always helped Daniel, even into adulthood. a down payment on his first car, assistance with student loans, cash for emergencies that always seemed to last a little too long. Eleanor had believed in generosity. "We can't take it with us, Sam," she used to say. And she was right, but she also believed in character. And in her absence, I realized character was what I had to measure now. So I made a decision: no more support. At least not until I saw where Daniel's loyalty truly lay. The first chance came when Daniel stopped by one evening without Chloe. He looked worn, his shirt wrinkled, his voice tired. We sat at the kitchen table, the same one where Eleanor used to serve Sunday breakfasts. "Dad," he began hesitantly, "Chloe and I are looking at condos downtown. The market's hot, and we don't want to miss out. But we're short on the down payment. I was hoping—" His voice trailed off. I folded my hands and leaned back. "I can't help you, son." "Not right now. Finances are tighter than you think." His brow furrowed. "Tighter?" "You own this house outright. You've got your pension." "Funerals are expensive," I said evenly. "And Eleanor and I had debts you didn't know about. I need to be careful." It wasn't a full lie. Funerals are expensive, though Eleanor and I had planned for that. But I let him believe there was less than there was. I wanted to see his reaction when the well ran dry. He sighed, rubbed his temples. "Chloe's not going to like this." Something inside me twisted. Not I'm disappointed. Not we'll figure it out. Just Chloe's not going to like this. "Daniel," I said quietly, "is this about building a future with her? Or about honoring your mother's?" His eyes flickered, guilt flashing for just a second before he stood and muttered, "I'll figure something out." When he left, I sat in the silence, staring at Eleanor's roses through the kitchen window. She had always believed Daniel's heart was good. I wanted to believe it too. But good hearts don't wilt when generosity is withheld. 2 nights later, Chloe arrived without Daniel. She stood on my porch in her sleek coat, her lips pursed. "Mr. Turner," she said crisply, "Daniel tells me you're having financial trouble." "That doesn't make sense to me. You're sitting on a house worth $500,000. Why cling to it when you could free yourself and help your family at the same time?" I let her words hang in the air. Her family, not mine. Hers. "I told Daniel the truth," I replied. "Money's tight. And this house isn't just property. It's Eleanor's legacy." She scoffed softly, like she was humoring a child. "Legacies are sentimental. They don't pay for futures. Daniel deserves more than scraps. And frankly, if you can't provide, then maybe he needs to think about what kind of support system he has." I stared at her until she shifted uncomfortably. "You mean me?" I said. Her eyes narrowed, but she didn't answer. I closed the door gently but firmly, and then I sat down at Eleanor's old desk and opened the notebook I had begun after the funeral. March 15th, 2025. Refused Daniel's request for down payment help. Claimed finances are tight. His response: concerned about Chloe's reaction, not mine. Chloe confronted me separately, pressured me to sell the house again. Language suggests she views me as an obstacle, not family. The words steadied me. Documentation, evidence, not of a crime, but of a test, and already the answers weren't looking good. Later that night, Maggie stopped by with fresh bread. She listened quietly as I told her about Daniel's request and Chloe's visit. She placed her hand on mine, her voice steady. "Sam, sometimes grief brings out the best in people, and sometimes it brings out the worst. Don't blame yourself for their choices." I nodded, but my chest still ached. Because Eleanor had believed in Daniel's best, and I wasn't sure I had the strength to watch him choose his worst. Grief is private. That's what Eleanor and I always believed. You mourn quietly, you hold family close, and you find strength in faith and community, not in spectacle. Which is why, when I discovered what Chloe had done, the betrayal cut deeper than I could have imagined. It was a Sunday morning when Maggie Hayes showed up at my door, her face pale, her phone trembling in her hand. "Sam," she said softly, "you need to see this." She handed me her phone. On the screen was a web page, bright photos of Eleanor, lifted from Facebook without permission, were splashed across the top. The headline read, "Help Daniel and Chloe save a grieving father from losing his home." I felt my stomach lurch. Below the headline was a long, flowery story about how Eleanor's passing had left me destitute, how my health was declining, how Daniel and Chloe were heroically supporting me in my darkest hour. There was even a photo of me at the funeral, head bowed, taken without my knowledge. The fundraiser goal? $200,000. I scrolled, my hands shaking. Comment after comment. Donation after donation. People from town, from church, even old colleagues of mine. They were giving money out of kindness, believing they were helping me, but none of that money was for me. I sat down heavily at the kitchen table, staring at the page until the words blurred. "Maggie," I whispered, "this is a lie." Every word of it, she nodded grimly. "I know. People mean well, but Chloe's spinning your grief into gold." Later that afternoon, Daniel came by. He didn't bring brochures this time. He brought a smile too wide, too forced. "Dad," he said, "I wanted to tell you. Chloe set up something amazing. A GoFundMe. The community's rallying around us. Around you, I kept my face still. Around me? Or around you two?" He hesitated, then pushed on. "We've already raised $15,000. It's incredible. People care, Dad. They want to see you comfortable, in a safe place. Like a retirement community?" I asked quietly. He looked away, his silence louder than any admission. I stood, my hands flat on the table. "Daniel, your mother and I built this home with our hands, our sweat, our love. And you're letting Chloe parade my grief around like a sales pitch. Do you have any idea how Eleanor would feel if she saw this?" His face twisted, guilt flashing for a moment before Chloe's voice echoed through the open doorway. "It's called adapting, Mr. Turner. People love a good story, and yours tugs heartstrings. Why not let kindness pay for comfort?" I turned to her, my voice low and sharp. "Kindness is not currency, and Eleanor's memory is not a marketing campaign." "For once?" she faltered, her smile slipping. But she quickly recovered. "You're being stubborn. Everyone's donating. Do you really want to stop something that helps Daniel?" "Helps Daniel?" I repeated. "Not me." The air between us was thick. Daniel shifted uncomfortably, caught between her ambition and my anger. Finally he muttered, "Dad, maybe just let this play out. It's not hurting anyone. Not hurting anyone." That night, I sat at Eleanor's desk with the notebook open, the glow of the lamp casting long shadows. I wrote carefully, my pen biting into the paper. March 18th, 2025. Chloe created a GoFundMe using Eleanor's photos and my grief. Claims I'm destitute. Goal, $200,000. Money routed to Daniel's account. Daniel complicit. Evidence gathered, screenshots. Witness confirmation from Maggie. I saved every screenshot, every donation receipt, every comment. Because Chloe thought she was clever, but I knew better. Fraud isn't just about money. It's about intent, and intent leaves footprints. When I closed the notebook, I looked up at Eleanor's photo on the mantel. Her smile, frozen in time, seemed to steady me. "They think I'm weak, Ellie," I whispered, "but I'm watching. And when the time comes, I'll show them who I really am." A school principal learns quickly. Paper speaks louder than words. For 30 years, I taught myself to look past excuses and pay attention to the records. Attendance logs, grade sheets, disciplinary reports. Patterns always emerged if you were patient enough. Now, in my own home, I fell back on that same discipline. Daniel and Chloe thought grief made me slow. What they didn't know was that grief had sharpened me. After the GoFundMe, I stopped thinking of their behavior as passing lapses. I began treating it like a case file, and every case needs a folder. I pulled out a battered manila folder from Eleanor's old desk. She had always kept stacks of them, for recipes, garden notes, even quilt patterns. I wrote in bold letters across the tab, "Character file, Daniel and Chloe." The first thing I slid inside was a printed copy of the GoFundMe page. I highlighted Chloe's flowery lies, a devoted son and his fiancée, sacrificing everything to care for his father. Underneath, I scribbled, funds deposited to Daniel's account. Sacrifice, none. Next went Maggie's screenshots of Chloe posting in a private Facebook group. Her words burned in my eyes. Easy money when you frame it right. People eat this stuff up. Then came Daniel's texts. He had slipped one evening asking me if I could at least transfer the utility bills to my name so Chloe can manage things online. I printed it and filed it under control attempts. Day by day, the folder grew. Phone records, screenshots, overheard comments Maggie passed along. Chloe bragging about how old men cling to houses like they're trophies. Daniel telling a friend at the cafe that Dad will cave eventually. He has to. I wrote nightly in my notebook, cross-referencing with the folder. Each entry was a thread in a larger web. March 21st, 2025. Daniel mentioned again that the house could set us up for life. Chloe nodded, adding, once it's sold, we can finally breathe. Their language confirms intent to treat house as theirs, not mine. The more I documented, the calmer I became. Rage alone is a wildfire. It burns everything without direction. But rage tethered to evidence? That's a controlled flame. And I knew how to use fire without letting it consume me. Maggie noticed the difference. One evening she stopped by with pie and found me at the kitchen table. Papers spread around like a detective's board. Sam, she said, folding her arms, you're building a case. I looked up at her, my glasses slipping down my nose. I spent a career documenting students. Some were bullies, some liars, some just lost. The only way to reach the truth was to lay it all out in black and white. Now I'm doing the same thing, because when the time comes, I want Daniel to see himself clearly. Her eyes softened. And Chloe? I shut the folder with a snap. She'll see too. In front of everyone that night, after Maggie left, I poured myself a cup of tea and sat in Eleanor's armchair. I stared at her photo on the mantel. Ellie, I whispered, I don't know if this is what you'd want, but I can't sit idle while they turn your memory into profit. I need Daniel to understand, not just for me, but for the man he's supposed to be. The house was quiet except for the creak of the floorboards and the ticking of the old clock. But in that silence, I felt Eleanor's presence. She had always been the one who believed in patience, in giving Daniel the benefit of the doubt. I wanted to believe she'd approve of the folder, not as revenge, but as clarity. I placed the folder back into her desk drawer and locked it. Then I wrote one final note before bed. March 23rd, 2025. Character folder established. Evidence growing. Goal, truth revealed, not revenge. Eleanor's legacy must remain untarnished. The folder was more than paper. It was a mirror I would one day hold up to my son, so he could no longer hide from himself. The folder gave me focus, but it didn't give me peace. Every page I slipped inside felt like another stone added to my chest. Daniel's weakness, Chloe's manipulation, their schemes piling higher with each passing day. I thought I had seen the worst of it. But then one evening, while sorting through Eleanor's belongings, I stumbled on something that changed everything. It was late, and the house smelled faintly of lavender, her favorite scent. I had been avoiding her sewing room since the funeral, but Maggie had insisted it was time. Clearing space isn't forgetting, Sam, she told me. It's making room to breathe. So I sat in the quiet, opening drawers one by one. Folded fabrics, half-finished quilts, buttons in jars. And then tucked beneath a box of patterns, I found a thin envelope with my name on it. My breath caught. Eleanor's handwriting, unmistakable, steady, graceful, the same hand that had written me letters during our courtship 50 years ago. My hands trembled as I broke the seal. Sam, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone. I know you'll want to protect Daniel, even from himself, but you need to be wise. You know better than anyone that character is revealed under pressure. That's why I never told Daniel about the lodge. It's in your name only, tucked away by the lake 2 counties over. I've kept the deed quiet, the account separate. The rental income has been steady for years, enough for you to live comfortably if you choose. But more than comfort, it's a test. I want you to watch Daniel. See if he chooses family or fortune. If he shows himself unworthy, use the lodge for good. Give it back to the world in my name. Don't be quick to decide. Wait, watch, and when the time is right, you'll know what to do. All my love, Eleanor. I sat there in stunned silence, the letter trembling in my hand. A secret property? A lodge by the lake? Eleanor had kept this from both of us. From Daniel, yes, but from me too. And yet it didn't feel like betrayal. It felt like trust. She had left me with more than money. She had left me with responsibility. I pulled out my notebook and wrote carefully. March 26th, 2025. Found letter from Eleanor. Reveals existence of second property. Lake Lodge. Deed in my name only. Income steady. Instruction. Test Daniel's character before revealing. If unworthy, donate lodge in her name. I folded the letter back into its envelope and placed it inside the character folder. It belonged there, not as evidence against Daniel, but as the measure by which all evidence would be judged. For days afterward, I walked through the house with the secret heavy in my pocket. Daniel and Chloe came by twice, pressing again about selling, their words sharpened by impatience. Each time I looked at my son and wondered, if he knew about the lodge, would he stop pretending this was for my good, or would it only feed his hunger? One evening, as I sat with Maggie on the porch, I told her. She listened quietly, her eyes widening as I described the lodge and Eleanor's instructions. She was always 2 steps ahead, Maggie said softly. She knew Daniel's heart might be tested. I nodded. Now the test is mine. To wait, to watch, and to decide when the truth comes to light. The night was still, the stars sharp against the dark. For the first time since Eleanor's passing, I felt something other than grief. I felt guided. Eleanor's letter had rattled me in ways I hadn't expected. Grief already weighs heavy enough. Add a secret property, a test of character, and the responsibility to judge your own son, and it becomes something heavier still. I spent several nights staring at the envelope by lamplight, wondering if I had misunderstood. But Eleanor never wrote in riddles. Her words were plain, deliberate, steady. A lodge by the lake, mine alone, income steady, a test. I knew I couldn't leave it as just words on paper. I needed proof, confirmation. So I called Lydia Grant. Lydia had been our family lawyer for decades. Not just Eleanor's legal advisor, but her friend. She'd guided us through wills, insurance policies, even the paperwork for Daniel's college. If anyone knew about the lodge, it was Lydia. When I arrived at her office, she greeted me with that same calm professionalism she'd always carried. But when I mentioned Eleanor's letter, I saw a flicker of recognition in her eyes. "She told you then?" Lydia asked quietly. I handed her the letter. "She told me after she was gone." Lydia read it carefully, then nodded. Eleanor was meticulous. She came to me years ago, insisting the property be deeded solely in your name. She said Daniel wasn't ready, that he might never be. She wanted to protect both you and the property until the time was right. I swallowed hard. "And it's real?" "The lodge?" Lydia reached into a file cabinet and pulled out a folder already labeled with my name. She laid out the documents on her desk. Deed, tax records, bank statements. "It's very real," she said. "The lodge sits on 12 acres by Clearwater Lake. It's been rented seasonally for retreats and fishing groups. Eleanor insisted on keeping the income quiet, reinvesting it into maintenance and savings. The account balance is just over $400,000. I stared at the papers, stunned. "400,000? She nodded. "And growing. The property itself has been appraised at just under $1.3 million. Conservative estimate. In today's market, it could fetch more." The numbers felt surreal, like they belonged to someone else's life, but the papers bore my name, my signature. Eleanor had woven this safety net beneath me without ever telling me. Why didn't she say anything? I asked softly. Lydia folded her hands. Because it wasn't about you, Sam. It was about Daniel. She wanted to see if he would stand on his own feet, if he would care for you without expecting reward. If he did, the lodge could be his one day. If he didn't, she tapped the letter. She trusted you to do what was right. I leaned back in my chair, the weight of it pressing down. She gave me the burden of judgment. Lydia's eyes softened. She gave you the gift of choice, and she trusted only you with it. I drove home in silence, the documents in a folder on the passenger seat. The road blurred through my tears. Eleanor had trusted me more than I realized, trusted me to protect her legacy, to protect our son from himself, to protect the truth. When I got home, I placed the lodge folder beside the character folder in Eleanor's desk drawer. Side by side, one showed Daniel and Chloe's choices, the other showed Eleanor's gift. Together, they formed the full picture. That night, Maggie stopped by with tea. I showed her the deed, the bank statements, the photos of the lodge Lydia had included. She whistled softly, shaking her head. Sam, that's not just property. That's a legacy. Yes, I said quietly. And it's not Daniel's. Not yet. Not like this. Maggie sipped her tea, then looked at me over the rim of the cup. So what will you do? I stared at Eleanor's letter again, the familiar loops of her handwriting, steady on the page. I'll wait, I said. I'll let Daniel reveal himself. And when the time comes, I'll show him what his mother left behind, and what he lost. Eleanor's letter gave me clarity. Lydia's papers gave me proof. The lodge was real, and the decision was mine alone. But having the deed in my desk drawer didn't make the waiting any easier. In fact, it made it harder. Because every time Daniel and Chloe opened their mouths, every selfish word they spoke echoed against the weight of what I knew but hadn't revealed. It didn't take long for their colors to show again. Maggie knocked one evening with her phone in hand. She looked both furious and heartbroken. Sam, you'd better see this before the whole town does. On the screen was Chloe's Instagram account, a new post. She stood in front of a luxury condo downtown, Daniel's arm draped around her shoulders. The caption read, New chapter coming soon. # future home. # blessed # inheritance. I felt my chest tighten. Inheritance. Eleanor's body was barely cold, and Chloe was already flaunting what she believed was hers to claim. The comments rolled in below. So happy for you two. Eleanor would be proud. Can't wait to see the place. Not one of them knew that Eleanor's true pride wasn't money or property, but the values she had lived by. Honesty, humility, compassion. I called Daniel that night. He answered on speakerphone, his voice casual. Dad, did you see Chloe's post? Isn't it great? We're finally getting ahead. Getting ahead with what? I asked quietly. Our future, he said. Selling the house will give us the down payment. It's time to move forward, Dad. You can't stay stuck in the past. The past you're talking about is your mother, I said, and this house is her memory. You think moving forward means selling her roses with the soil they're planted in? There was a pause, and then Chloe's voice chimed in faintly from the background. Don't let him guilt you, Daniel. He'll come around when he sees it's for the best. I hung up before my anger boiled over. That night, I opened the character folder again. I printed Chloe's post, highlighted the word #inheritance, and slid it inside. Then I wrote in my notebook. March 30th, 2025. Chloe publicly posts about inheritance. Condo purchase implied. Daniel complicit, repeats Chloe's words. No mention of grief, no respect for Eleanor's memory. It was no longer just whispers or private arguments. They were broadcasting their greed to the world. The next week brought more of the same. Chloe hosted a dinner at their apartment. She invited me, perhaps thinking she could smooth things over. I went, because sometimes the best way to learn someone's heart is to sit quietly and listen. The table was set lavishly, wine poured generously. Chloe talked the entire evening about plans, vacations, renovations, investments. Daniel laughed along, nodding dutifully. At one point she raised her glass and said, "To Eleanor, whose legacy will let us live the life we deserve." I nearly choked on my drink. Afterward, when Daniel walked me to the door, I said quietly, "Son, does it ever bother you, the way Chloe talks about your mother?" He shifted uncomfortably. She just wants us to have security. Security bought with greed isn't security, I told him. It's a leash. He didn't answer. Back home, I added again to the folder. April 2nd, 2025. Dinner at Daniel's. Chloe toasts Eleanor as source of the life we deserve. Daniel silent, both treating inheritance as entitlement. Each page I added felt like another nail in the coffin of Daniel's innocence. Eleanor's test was working. He was revealing himself with every word, every silence. Maggie saw it too. She stopped by often, her sharp eyes noticing details I missed. "Sam," she said one night, "I don't think Daniel's evil. But Chloe has a hold on him. He's blinded. And if Eleanor meant this as a test, well, he's failing it." I nodded, staring at the two folders in my desk, one fat with evidence of Daniel and Chloe's choices, the other heavy with deeds and bank statements from Eleanor's lodge. The contrast couldn't have been clearer, and I knew then that when the time came, the truth wouldn't be revealed in private. It had to be public. Not just so Daniel could see himself, but so everyone who had been deceived by Chloe's performance could see her too. The test was nearly over, and soon I would show my son his true reflection. By April, the character folder was thick with evidence. Chloe's online boasts, Daniel's quiet complicity, the fundraiser lies, the condo toasts, each page a stone stacked on top of the last, and beside it sat the second folder, Lydia's documents for the Clearwater Lodge, Eleanor's hidden gift, two stories waiting to collide, one of greed, one of legacy. I knew the collision couldn't be private. Eleanor had asked me to test Daniel, and tests mean nothing unless the results are undeniable. If I confronted him alone, he'd hide behind excuses or Chloe's shadow. If I told him quietly, Chloe would spin it into another story about how they were building a future. No, the truth had to be revealed in a way that even Chloe's silver tongue couldn't twist. That's when I thought of Pastor Raymond Cole. Raymond had led our church for more than 20 years. He'd known Eleanor since she was a girl, and he'd buried her with grace when the time came. Every spring, after Easter, the church held a memorial service, a gathering where families lit candles for their loved ones, sharing stories, prayers, and songs. This year, Eleanor's name would be among them. I decided that would be the moment. I called Lydia first. She listened quietly as I explained my plan, then said, "Sam, public revelations are powerful but messy. Are you sure you want to risk humiliating Daniel?" I swallowed hard. "Eleanor wanted me to see his character." "I've seen it. Now he needs to see it too. Clearly in the eyes of everyone he's been deceiving. If he has any chance of finding his way back, it won't be through whispers. It'll be through truth laid bare." She agreed to prepare. She would draft a simple statement of ownership for the lodge, notarize and clean, and she would attend the service with copies of the relevant documents. Next, I spoke to Pastor Cole. He was cautious at first. "Sam, the memorial is a place of healing. I wouldn't want conflict to overshadow it." "It won't," I said. "This isn't about conflict. It's about Eleanor's legacy, and about saving my son before he sinks any deeper." He studied me a long time before nodding. "If Eleanor trusted you with this, I'll give you the space to speak." The days leading up to the memorial felt heavier than the funeral itself. I rehearsed what I would say, then tore it up, then wrote it again. I walked Eleanor's rose garden, breathing in the scent of blossoms she'd tended with such care, and asked her spirit for strength. Maggie checked on me often. "Sam, are you ready for the fallout?" she asked one evening. "Fallout?" "Chloe will fight. Daniel may break, and once words are spoken publicly, they can't be unsaid." I nodded slowly. "I'm not afraid of Chloe." "And Daniel." My voice caught. "Daniel needs to break before he can rebuild. If I keep protecting him, I'm only letting him sink further." The night before the service, I sat at Eleanor's desk one last time. I opened the character folder and flipped through each page. The GoFundMe, the condo toast, Chloe's cruel comments. Then I opened the lodge folder and laid them side by side. One showed corruption, the other redemption. When I finally closed both, I whispered into the quiet, "Tomorrow, Ellie. Tomorrow, I'll finish the test." The church was full again, but it wasn't like the funeral. This time there was music, candles, and voices lifted in remembrance instead of grief's hollow silence. The spring memorial service had always been Eleanor's favorite tradition, families gathering not just to mourn but to honor. It was meant to be gentle, healing, but for me, it was also the stage Eleanor had left for me to use. I sat in the front pew, clutching the envelope Lydia had prepared. Inside were copies of the deed to the Clearwater Lodge, bank statements, and Eleanor's letter. Proof, the kind that could not be argued away. My chest tightened as Pastor Cole lit the final candle and invited families to share their stories. Daniel and Chloe sat 3 rows behind me. Chloe wore a black dress too polished for mourning, her phone clutched in her hand like it was part of her. Daniel looked pale, restless. They hadn't expected me to speak. They thought today was only about Eleanor's memory. When my turn came, I rose slowly. Every eye in the church followed me as I walked to the pulpit. I cleared my throat, my voice steady though my heart pounded. "I want to thank you all," I began, "for being here to remember my Eleanor. She loved this church, this community, and each of you. She believed in quiet strength and honest character. And even in death, she is still teaching me." I paused, scanning the room. Eleanor left me a letter. In it, she revealed something none of you knew. She owned a lodge by Clearwater Lake. She kept it hidden, even from me, because she wanted to test the character of our family, especially our son. Gasps rippled through the pews. Chloe's phone lowered slightly. Daniel stiffened. "She wrote," I continued, lifting the letter, "see if Daniel chooses family or fortune. If he shows himself unworthy, use the lodge for good. Give it back to the world in my name." The silence was heavy. I opened the envelope and spread the documents across the pulpit. Here is the proof. Deeds in my name. Accounts Eleanor managed in secret. She left me the choice. I turned my gaze toward Daniel. And I have been watching. I've seen the fundraiser built on lies. I've seen the online boasts of inheritance. I've heard the toast made at dinners, where your mother's memory was reduced to a bank account. Murmurs swept through the crowd. Chloe's face flushed red, her lips tight. She leaned toward Daniel, whispering furiously. I raised my voice, not in anger, but in sorrow. Eleanor's test was simple. Would you honor her memory or exploit it? Would you care for family or chase fortune? Daniel, you have failed that test. Daniel's head dropped. Chloe shot to her feet. "This is slander," she snapped. "He's twisting things because he can't face reality. That house should have been sold, and the lodge, if it even exists, belongs to Daniel. By right." I met her glare. "By right?" "Nothing was your right. Eleanor entrusted it to me, and she asked me to choose carefully. My choice is this. The lodge will be donated in her name to a foundation for education and community retreats. Its income will never line greedy pockets. It will serve the people Eleanor loved." Pastor Cole stepped forward, his voice firm. "Miss Martin, sit down. This is not slander. These are documents. These are truths." The congregation stirred. Some shook their heads, others whispered in shock. Maggie caught my eye from the side pew and gave the smallest nod of encouragement. Daniel finally spoke, his voice shaking. Dad, I didn't mean—" But Chloe cut him off, tugging his arm. "Don't apologize, Daniel. He's just manipulating everyone. Let's go." She tried to pull him out of the pew, but for the first time in months, Daniel resisted. His shoulders slumped, his face pale. "Chloe, just stop." She hissed at him, furious, but when he didn't move, she stormed out alone, her heels clacking against the tile. The doors slammed behind her. The church fell quiet. All eyes turned back to me. I closed Eleanor's letter gently. My wife believed in truth. Today I have honored her by speaking it. The lodge will stand as her legacy, not as a prize for greed. And though my heart breaks for what my son has become, I still pray he finds his way back to what she raised him to be. When I stepped down from the pulpit, Maggie reached for my arm. Daniel stayed seated, his face buried in his hands. For the first time, he had no words, and for the first time, I believed the test was over. The morning after the memorial, the house was quiet again, the kind of quiet that doesn't come from peace, but from aftermath, like the silence after a storm when the air is still heavy and the branches lie broken on the ground. I sat at Eleanor's desk, staring at the two folders, the character folder thick with betrayal, the lodge folder heavy with Eleanor's gift. Both had served their purpose. Daniel hadn't called that night. Chloe hadn't returned. I wasn't surprised. Public shame cuts deeper than private warnings. For months I had watched them justify, spin, and smile their way through manipulation. But paper and truth had a way of stripping illusions bare. By noon, Lydia Grant came by the house. She set her briefcase on the dining table, the same table where Eleanor had hosted Thanksgivings, the same one Chloe had once called outdated. "Sam," Lydia said gently, "you made your choice clear yesterday. Are you ready to make it legal?" I nodded. "The lodge goes to charity. Eleanor wanted it used for good. Let's make sure it stays that way." She opened her case and spread out documents. "I've drafted a transfer agreement. The Clearwater Lodge will be deeded to the Eleanor Turner Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to education and community retreats. Maggie Hayes has agreed to sit on the advisory board. The income will be managed by trustees, ensuring it's never misused." I traced the title with my finger. "Eleanor always loved teaching. She'd be proud," Lydia smiled. "She'd be more than proud. She'd be at peace." But peace came with a price. Daniel was still my son, and cutting him out entirely wasn't easy. "What about him?" I asked quietly. "Do I leave him nothing?" Lydia's eyes softened. "That's up to you, Sam." "Eleanor trusted your judgment." I sat there staring at the papers. Daniel had betrayed trust, yes. He had let Chloe's greed speak louder than his own conscience, but I couldn't erase him completely. Eleanor wouldn't want that. "Set aside something small," I said finally. "Enough that he knows he's not abandoned, but not enough to fuel more greed. Something symbolic." Lydia nodded and drafted an amendment. A trust of modest size to be released to Daniel in stages, contingent on community service hours, logged and verified. Not money handed freely, but earned. When I signed the papers, my hand shook, not from doubt, but from the weight of closing a door. Later that evening, Daniel appeared at my doorstep. He looked 10 years older than he had a week ago. His shoulders slumped, his eyes red. Chloe wasn't with him. "Dad," he said quietly, I don't know what to say." "Then don't," I replied, stepping aside. "Come in." We sat at the kitchen table, the place where so much of our family's life had unfolded. He stared at his hands, twisting his wedding band, though he wasn't married, not yet. Maybe he'd been rehearsing. "She left me, Dad," he said finally. "Chloe's gone. Said she didn't sign up for public humiliation. Said if you were going to embarrass her, then she was done." I studied him. "And what about you? Were you done too? Or were you just following along?" His eyes brimmed with tears. "I don't know anymore. I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought helping Chloe was helping me. But now, I see what I've done." I leaned forward, my voice steady. "You failed your mother's test, Daniel." That doesn't mean you can't change, but change doesn't come with easy money or quick fixes. It comes with humility. He nodded slowly, his shoulders shaking. I don't deserve anything, I sighed. Maybe not. But you're still my son, and Eleanor still believed in second chances. You'll have something. Not everything. Not the lodge. That belongs to the world now. But something small, tied to responsibility. You'll work for it. And if you want to rebuild, you'll rebuild with your own hands. Tears slipped down his face. For the first time since Eleanor's passing, I saw not the boy who had turned away, but the boy she had once held in her arms, broken but not beyond repair. When he left that night, I watched him walk down the path alone. Chloe was gone, the mask of arrogance stripped away. What remained was uncertain, but at least it was real. I closed the door, looked at Eleanor's photo on the mantel, and whispered, "The test is over, Ellie." And I did what you asked. I gave him truth. Now the rest is up to him. Spring melted into summer, and for the first time since Eleanor's passing, I felt the weight begin to lift from the house. Not vanish, grief never vanishes, but shift into something quieter, something I could carry without buckling. Her roses bloomed in waves of red and white. Her handwriting still sat framed in my study, and her voice lingered in the silence when I sat too long with my thoughts. The lodge was no longer mine. The papers were signed, the transfer complete. It now belonged to the Eleanor Turner Foundation, its income funding scholarships and community programs. The first retreat was already scheduled, a group of teachers from the city looking for rest by the lake. Eleanor would have smiled at that. She had always believed teachers deserved more than they received. As for Daniel, his life looked different too. He came by more often, but the visits were quiet, stripped of the polished rehearsals Chloe used to script. Sometimes he sat at the kitchen table in silence. Sometimes he helped Maggie weed Eleanor's roses. Sometimes he simply stood in the hallway staring at old photographs. The arrogance was gone. What replaced it was harder to look at, a young man weighed down by shame. One evening he brought me a stack of papers, community service logs, hours worked at the food bank, tutoring kids in math, fixing fences for elderly neighbors. He set them on the table without a word. I flipped through them, noting the signatures, the dates. He had logged 80 hours already, not because the trust demanded it, though it did, but because, as he said quietly, I needed to feel useful again. We sat there in silence for a long while. Finally, I said, "You're taking the first steps, Daniel. But this isn't about proving something to me. It's about proving something to yourself, and to the memory of your mother." His eyes glistened. "I know. I don't want her last memory of me to be who I was these past months." I placed a hand on his shoulder. "Then make sure it isn't. Live the rest of your life as proof of who she raised you to be." He nodded, and for the first time in a long time, I believed he meant it. Later that week, I stood at the lake where Eleanor's ashes had been scattered. Maggie came with me, carrying a basket of roses from Eleanor's garden. We let them float on the water, the petals drifting out like tiny ships. "She'd be proud of you, Sam," Maggie said softly. I shook my head. "She'd be proud of all of us." Even Daniel, in time, because that was the truth. Eleanor hadn't left me the lodge to enrich us. She'd left it to reveal us, to show Daniel who he was, to show me the strength I still carried, and to show Chloe, well, nothing more than the exit doors she eventually took. On the drive home, I thought about the notebooks stacked in my desk, the character folder, the lodge folder, and the journal, where I'd recorded every step. I didn't burn them, didn't throw them away. I kept them as reminders, not to dwell on betrayal, but to remember how close we came to losing ourselves. Now the test was over. Eleanor's legacy lived in scholarships and retreats at Clearwater Lodge. Her roses still bloomed each season, tended by Maggie and me, with Daniel slowly learning how to prune them properly. And the Turner name though tarnished by greed for a season, carried hope again. I sat on the porch one evening, the sunset painting the sky in gold. Daniel was inside, helping Maggie wash dishes after dinner. I could hear their laughter through the open window, and for the first time in months, the sound didn't ache, it healed. I whispered into the evening air, "Ellie, the test is finished." He stumbled, but maybe he's learning. "And your gift. Your gift has already begun to heal others." The wind stirred through the roses, carrying their fragrance across the porch. I closed my eyes, breathed it in, and let myself finally rest.